Like that beat. You kind of like that beat?
Yes.
I probably put back in a beat. Oh my gosh. Hey everybody, it's your girl here, Chauncey K. Robinson, aka Twisted CKR. What's up, Twisted fam? I am here with my mama, Karen Robinson, Wakanda Forever. And we are doing part 2 of the Sandman. Our part 1, you can find it on the channel here. We talked extensively about some of the comparisons between the comic book series and the show. And of course, you know, if you didn't read the comic book series, it's fine. We definitely talked more about the TV show, but just kind of using it for comparison, talking about some of the things that happened in the show. And like, you know, I think we both came to the conclusion, Mom, that we wanted to, because neither of us had actually read the comic book series, right?
Yeah.
So, and wanting to kind of see what it was about. Although I, you know, and looking at stuff in the comic book series now, I realize it's probably a lot grittier. And that's probably saying a lot given how the Netflix show actually is, which isn't necessarily like rated PG either. So there's that. But also, everyone, happy Friday. Happy Labor Day weekend. I hope those of you who are getting a 3-day weekend, enjoy your 3-day weekend, rest. But also remember why we got Labor Day, which was for the fight of workers' rights and whatnot. I actually have a new published list out that came out on People's World. I'm probably going to try to link to it a little later, that talks about 7 movies that you can watch that are in the spirit of Labor Day weekend. We got one of my fave ones that inspired one of my fave songs, 9 to 5 with Dolly Parton. Working 9 to 5, just some baby.
These are something.
Yeah, whatever. I just like the beat. So we got that and some others on there. If you're thinking about, because for those
wait. Let me ask one question. You got Norma Ray on there?
I do have Norma Ray on there. Norma Ray is also listed.
Okay.
Yes. We had to have Norma Ray. We got a few of them, Grapes of Wrath and some others. So I'll link to that towards the end once I, do a little bit of a reminder for people about the 7 movies they can watch. But also, because, if you are going to be out and about, because where I am on the Golden Coast is an excessive heat warning. And oh my gosh, they are not lying, because I'm in here, y'all, because the air conditioner for our house, our apartment, is towards the front. And so it doesn't always reach back here where my little mini studio is. And we ain't going to be going too long with part 2 today, because I just got the fan and I'm hot. But we gonna push through. But like I said, if you are dealing with excessive heat warning and whatnot, stay safe, stay inside, and watch those 7 movies. Pick one of those movies to watch for Labor Day weekend, so you're still celebrating the thing. Ma, do you have any projects or anything going on that you want to talk about before we get in? I know you're writing a book.
Yeah, trying to.
All right. She writes fantasy, y'all. So be on the lookout for that for sure. All right, so let's get into it. So last week we kind of focused more on Dream's main thing of trying to get his powers back, and kind of just getting into the whole history of the Endless. Dream. And yes, I'm not into the whole emo look thing, but I can see the appeal. But and who dream was. And I like that although we got glimpses into who he was, it wasn't so much so to the point where there's not more to explore, right? We haven't even met all of his supposed siblings. There's a mystery sibling who I guess left their post. I don't know what their post was. They only kind of hinted at it. We had some of you, thanks to everyone who also gave commentary in the comment section in the rewatch. For those who watched the rewatch of our live stream, always a pleasure hearing from y'all and what y'all have to say about things, particularly some of the insights some of you gave who had watched the show, who had read the comic books back in the day. And some of the little insights y'all were able to give on some of the things we were talking about in the first one, such as who Desire was and things like that, and a little bit more of the dynamics. So if you haven't checked out the comment section of part 1, definitely do so. We had some great commentary in there as well. So what we have with this one is we talked about part 1, and I feel like the prevalent thing that I have seen, Ma, is that people a lot of people said that they really enjoyed episodes 1 through, I believe, 5. No, probably episodes 1 through 6, and then around episodes 7 through 10 was when they didn't love it as much as the first half. So I wanted to dive a little bit more into that because we are kind of focusing in on the second half a little bit, some of its shortcomings, some of the things that worked, some of the things that didn't work and whatnot, just like we did with the first half, because first half wasn't perfect in my opinion. I felt like it started a little slow.
Yeah, it started off slow.
And things like that. But I also know that for some people, and I think, what did you think? Like, did you particularly care for which side of the season did you like more, the first half or the second half?
I think it's I like some of the first half. Well, I'm on both. You know, the first half, like I said, the last parts. I think the good parts came after he escaped from there, and he started looking for. I think that's what 3 or 4. 3 or 4.
About 3, yeah, about the third one.
Yeah, from there, after that, I I really start liking it, and then when we went on to the other parts, second half, it was good. But it started off like, okay, I watched it, and when he was getting in that part when he was getting ready to go, and it took him, and they whatever they was doing. But after that, it was like, okay, I know we had to find out about why he kept them and all like that. It was just like, in a way, it was dragging.
Yeah, and that's why it was so surprising to me. The crowd of audience opinion or whatnot, to go online and then see, because I actually, like you said, I started to really get into it more about maybe the end of the third episode going into the fourth. That's when I felt like for me, the series or the season started to find its footing, because I felt like the first 2 episodes, I was like, okay, how long are we going to be doing this? Is this the whole first season? I hope not. And then around that third episode going onward, I was like, okay, they had to lay the groundwork. I get it. And I'm enjoying this so far. And then around Rose's part, when we got Rose the Vortex and everything that was happening there, I also enjoyed that too. I will say, I think, in my opinion, some people, or maybe many people, didn't care for it because of the fact that it definitely, I agree that it was a tone shift. And that's one of the things I have seen people have issues with, because I think the issue, and this is the issue with Netflix, right? Or any show where you can binge watch it. When you've gotten into a groove with a show, and you're like, okay, this is what the show is about. This is what we're focusing on. And then the very next episode, there's like just a shift to a whole new character that now you have to get used to and get to know. I do think that is what a lot of people had the issue with. Not so much that episodes 7 through 10 or 6 through 10 were bad or worse or lesser than necessarily. That I think it was more so that they were different. I think that, would you agree that maybe that's what people had a little bit more of an issue with? Because it is a different set. I mean, the second half is very different in some regards. One, Dream takes a back seat. And that to me, I will admit, that was a little bit of something I had to get used to all over again. I had just got into the groove with watching Dream and his adventures and what he was trying to figure out with his life. We met Death and everything, and I thought that was cool. And then suddenly, enter Rose. And now I have to get to know Rose. Now I liked Rose, but it was also like, okay, now I have to get to know this whole new character in her life. And at first, there's no obvious connection with her in Dream. And I think for some people that was a little bit of an abrupt shift. And maybe they didn't, I think you went from this whole fantastical world with Dream to now this very little bit more, real world based world, not so real world with Rose. And I think maybe that threw a lot of people off. What do you think?
That when yeah, that's true, because he did take his backseat to that.
He did. He wasn't the main character anymore.
He wasn't the main. She was the main focus. But you can see that when it first started off, he opened up the book to read about Rose.
Yes, because everyone has a book, which I think is very interesting.
Yeah, that is. And then but then what was the other lady name? I forgot her name.
Lucien.
Yeah, Lucien. When she was telling about rumors, when the guy was telling about the rumors, and she repeated it to him. But I think he said he knows about Rose,
or he had heard about her, and he knew about the vortex.
Yeah, vortex.
And I do think it's also interesting that when it came to Rose, when they talked about the whole situation of the vortex and stuff, it also added to the universe, but didn't explain everything to us, because even Dream didn't know the whole extent of why vortexes happen, what's the point of a vortex and things like that. And it is a very interesting thing, because you don't really get an explanation of how vortexes come to be and why they even exist in the first place. Because it almost seems like, when you think about it, as we found out what a vortex is, it's a being, a person who has the ability to kind of break down the barrier between dreams and reality and non-dreams, right? Yeah. And so it's kind of weird. And this was my issue a little bit with the plot line. I don't think it's the show itself. I think it was more so the source material, because this is from the source material. It was kind of like, so are vortexes just created to die? Do they just come about to die? Because no matter what, it seems as though Dream is tasked with having to get rid of a vortex. Although they do explain that a vortex is fine until they start becoming a threat to the dream realm. But it almost seems like they always end up becoming a threat to the dream world at some point. So it's kind of like almost a curse to be a vortex. And that's what I didn't get. I was just like, so does a vortex just end up happening by mistake, and they just end up being a human that ends up having to be killed?
Yeah, but she wasn't supposed to be the vortex.
Well, she wasn't. And that's, and this is what I mean. I enjoyed the second half for the simple thing that things were happening. Yes, it did get a little bit more melodramatic. I'll admit that. Because, you had the whole thing with Rose and Jed, her younger brother who had been taken and ended up, dealing with this abuse situation. You had the whole thing with Lita, who is AKA in the comic books Wonder Woman's daughter, but not so much here. And that situation, you had Ken and Barbie and stuff like that. You had a lot going on. And that's what I mean about the tone shift, because for the first half of the season, we were very specifically focused in on Dream. It was a very solo kind of show. And then suddenly you're told, okay, now you have to get to know all these other characters. And on top of that, you have to care about them too, because you're not always going to care about a character you get introduced. And I kind of give kudos to the show for doing this, because that's rough. When you start to get used to a main character, to bring in a new character, usually you're supposed to one would argue kind of let us all get used to them by not making them the central focus from jump. And they didn't do that with Rose. As soon as Rose came on the scene, we're focusing on Rose and we're seeing just bits of Dream, which that's a risk. And I think for some people, the risk paid off. Like myself, I watched it and I was like, hey, I dig this. You know, we get to know these whole new characters. And I think it also established for us that the show isn't just about Dream, but he is a central focus in the sense of the dream world and everyone who is affected by dreams, but not just about the Sandman himself. You know what I mean? And I thought, because I think that's also what was abrupt to people, you know? Hey, Sabetty, how's it going? Happy Friday. Happy Labor Day weekend. Sorry, I'm sweating a little bit because it's hot. I'm literally looking at my computer and it's saying excessive heat warning.
I mean the chat.
You don't see the chat, Mom?
That's what I'm trying.
Did you open it up? You have to press the little bubble that says chat on the side.
Okay, I got hi.
Technology, y'all.
Yes.
Yeah. Hey, Sabetty. Yeah. So we're just we're talking about for those who are joining out or catching the rewatch. We're talking about the second half of the season a little bit more, and more so kind of diving into why it seems to be a common sentiment among the people who have watched in the fandom that people didn't like the second half of the season as much as the first half. And I guess my not argument, but my thought process isn't so much that the second half was not as good as the first half. It was different. And I think, you know, like I was just saying, the show took a risk by focusing in on Rose as hardcore as they did in the second half when the audience had just got used to Dream. And I think that was maybe a little too abrupt. But I think it also talks to the nature of the comic series. And I think it's good that for the first season, they established this, because they could have done something where for the whole first season, they just focused on Dream. They took all the little stories and made it all about Dream. And then the second season is like, oh, now we're trying to talk about this other person. And then people could have got upset then. But what they did, they started I think they made it so we get used to it from jump. Yes, Betty, they were saying people, you go online and things like that in certain forums, and people were just like, I didn't necessarily care for the second half of the season. Episode 7 and 10 didn't really lose me, but I didn't love it as much as the first half.
Because it was a dream. I mean, they wanted to see, I guess they wanted to see more of him.
Yeah, exactly. And what I think the show did, which was very smart, I think, in the first season, is tell you this show isn't about just Dream. This show is a whole bunch of stories, because that's how the comic book is also set up. The comic book series, the Sandman, from my understanding, the Sandman, Morpheus, is a common thread. He's the common denominator with all the stories, because eventually somehow they connect to the dream world, but he is not always the main focus of the stories. And that is the same in the comic books. And I think like I said, that's why I think this was smart for the show to do in the first season, to kind of get people used to that, to say, hey, I know this is abrupt, or this feels like a weird tone shift, or suddenly that we've switched what this show is about, but we haven't. This is what the show is about. It's about different stories all connected to the endless, to the dream world. And so you had the first half of the story establishing who Morpheus is, and now we're moving on to these other stories that are connected to Morpheus, but he may not be the central focus. And some people may love that, and some people may hate it, for better or worse. I also wanted to what are you about to say, Mom? Go ahead.
Yeah, I wasn't saying that.
Oh, okay. I thought I heard you. I also wanted to connect. This is a picture of Rose from the comic books.
Oh.
Yes. So she still has the different color hair that we see in the Rose that we our TV Rose, but instead of the dreadlocks, we got the blonde hair with the different kind of streaks in it. We went in part one, we kind of did a little bit of an extensive thing about the recasting, not the recasting, the casting of the series, and people having issues with it. More so, we talked about it in relation to the character of Death, which I thought was
I
perfect
think
casting.
good.
I absolutely love the actress that is playing Death, and I hope we get more of her in future stories for this series. But I will also say, there were some issues that people had with the casting of Rose. Now, let's be honest. Most people, not most people, I don't want to say that. Some people had issues because here you have a blonde white woman and she was changed to a black girl. So let's just be honest. Let's be honest. Some people really just had an issue with that. But other people, I think, had a little bit of a valid thing where some people were saying that they felt like they couldn't connect with Rose as much in this show. And I will admit that I think we gave our top 4 fave characters of the show, I believe, lady. And she wasn't in my top 4, right? She was like maybe a distant 5th fave character. And this is what I mean, that this was a gamble, right? Because here's the second half of the show, of the season, and you're focusing in on the character, and you're taking a gamble because we kind of have to also like this character too, to a certain degree, because she is now the main focus. So there were some people that felt like they couldn't connect with Rose as much. And that was also an issue with the second half, because here it is. Her main plight is that she's the vortex. We learn about her family, Unity, her great grandmother comes into play. Her brother Jed. I loved her brother Jed. I'll say that. I loved him. I thought that little boy was the cutest, and he just did such an amazing job. I want to see more of Jed. Especially when he was the Sandman himself. It was adorable. But I will say, I also too can admit I didn't feel as much of a connection with Rose. No shade to the actress at all. I just think it was with the characterization she was given a little bit. I didn't feel like I got to know her. I felt I got to know other characters through her. You know what I mean, Ma? Like the people that she came in contact with at the house, like Hal and the women and Barbie and Ken and Lita. I felt like we got to know them through her, but not so much her. Sabeti is pointing out that the actress who played Death was amazing. I am in agreement, Sabeti. She was. But yeah, I felt like I couldn't connect with her as much. And I wonder if she's like that in the comic books too. What did you think of that? Was she your top 4? I can't remember when we said our top. Well, I think we did our top 3 fave characters. Was she your top 3? She wasn't my top 3.
I don't think so. I think it was just Morpheus, Death.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, was it? I don't know, what was it? Desire or Hades? I don't know which one.
Who's Hades?
Well,
Lucifer.
Yeah,
you talking about some Greek mythology here? Was it?
Lucifer.
Yeah.
Well, he is supposed to be Hades or whatever.
Yeah, but, just by another name.
Mm-hmm. But but Rose, okay. Are you trying, like, when you say didn't connect with her? In a sense, I see what you're saying, because you just saw Rose. They didn't really give, like with the mother. You saw when they was leaving the boy, and the mother and her was leaving. But I didn't understand. That didn't quite make sense here. Why didn't they, and didn't really explain her too much. I understand what you're saying there. They was just leaving. They just came in that part. She left the boy, and they went somewhere else. And then they came back to that she was looking for him.
Yeah. Yeah.
I understand when you say you couldn't connect, because I didn't, I believe we needed a more backstory on her.
Yeah, and that's what I mean too. So Betty is saying it took me a bit to connect to the character, but I did. She was my number 3, maybe because she brought people together. Exactly. Mm-hmm. I think she served a great purpose in terms of her plot, right? But I feel like for a character, you need more than them to just be a plot point. Because the funny thing is, Morpheus actually kind of serves the same purpose. Morpheus is literally the common denominator of the show. Him existing and what he has, dominion over, the dream world, is what allows us to see these other stories, right? Even if he's not the main character, he's our way of being introduced to these other characters. But what the show was able to do with Morpheus, I felt like, even in the first couple of episodes, was more so, at least from the second episode to like the fifth episode to the sixth episode, was really establish his type of character. He's not perfect. He is quick to jump to conclusions and judgment. I mean, heck, he put his ex, one of his true loves, in hell for 10,000 years. Justice for his ex, y'all. He put his true love in hell for like 10,000 years thus far. And he's very melancholy at times, things like that. But he is our main character. But he has a little bit more personality. He's not perfect. He has layers to him. He has growth. My issue with Rose, I felt like, was I didn't know where her arc was necessarily. You know, we meet her when she's talking to a younger Jed, and it's like she's a strong young girl. You see that, right? She's strong for her brother, and she somewhat remains strong throughout. She's lost her mother very recently, things like that. And so from jump that she's a strong young woman. And I dug that. The issue, I think, for me was when she was, and she's also capable of taking care of herself. We saw that in the alleyway when she first meets Gilbert and stuff like that. She eventually was able to take care of herself. So it wasn't like she was like some damsel in distress or some meek girl who eventually needed to come out of her shell to take on her power as the Vortex. And not saying you need that, but because that wasn't the case, I almost felt like she didn't really have an arc, for like a character arc. You know what I mean? Like there was no end point for her of like suddenly she accepts that she's the Vortex. She's telling Morpheus, no, this dream is over. Like she's strong from jump. And so it's almost kind of like the main journey for her is getting her brother back, but that's about it. It's all action orientated. It's all about that task she has to do. And we don't really get to see necessarily a change in her, not that she needed to change at all. But the thing is, when you tell a story, you kind of want to go on the journey with the character. So they need to get to a point. So they need to start from a point, at least my opinion for storytelling. And because Rose kind of emerges already fully realized, you almost feel like you're out of the loop on who she is, So that's kind of, that was my gripe with her. And I think maybe if they had kind of had something to make her, some internal thing she had to come to grips with, like maybe some issue with her mom or something, so that we could kind of be like, okay, this is what she needs to deal with. I think that would have allowed us to connect. I think that would have allowed everyone to connect with her quicker, because I feel like that might be why people felt like that second half wasn't as compelling as the first half.
Yeah, they didn't go in deep with. They should have explored more on how she felt about leaving her brother behind and why,
Yes.
I think that would have put more issue on who she was and why she was so determined to get him back, and why, she felt that he should have never been left with his father. I didn't understand that myself.
Exactly. And Betty makes a good point. I think she says, Betty says, I think I connected most when she was rescuing her brother at the hotel. I agree too, because that's when you really see an issue, and I do think we got a little bit of a glimpse of the situation with her brother where she did feel like she let him down, where she felt like she should have been more proactive in finding him and getting him. And so we saw that, but we didn't get to see her grapple with it as much. And partly that was due to not necessarily just the character, but the structure of the episodes, right? We had so many other characters in the second half thrown at us too, right? We had Hal, we had Barbie, we had Ken, we had Lita, we had Hector.
When
You
we met
know,
the crazy serial killers.
yeah, yeah, exactly. We met the crazy serial killers. You know, there was just so much to have to deal with that unfortunately I feel like the moments we could have had with Rose um ended up taking a back seat, unfortunately. And I think that might have been one of the problems with the second half of the season, because we didn't get a chance to really kind of deal with Rose. You know, we got a little glimpse of who she was, but then suddenly we have to know uh, everybody else, you know, so we don't get a chance to grapple with her as much. Woke AF is in the building. Hey, Woke AF is saying the Sandman is one of my favorite comic series. Definitely. You know, I feel like what my mom and I were just talking about in an earlier part was, you know, I actually hadn't read Gaiman's The Sandman. I had read his other iterations, like when the what was the name of that comic that came out with the latest one of the Marvel movies with those new set of characters, right? I had read his version of that, and I think he also did Swamp Thing. He did a few things on Swamp Thing, and I read those, but I hadn't read Sandman. And definitely watching the series and all the little tidbits and everything definitely made me think, okay, I want to read this comic series. I kind of have to read this comic series, you know, for sure. Woke is giving us up because Rose and Lita are tied into DC superhero stuff. So a lot of that got lost because they didn't have exactly. That was another thing I was going to
Wow.
bring up as well. I touched on it a little bit. Thanks for that, Woke. I touched on that actually a little bit in part one of the discussion last week, where I was pointing out the little, and I think I kind of blew people's minds because not everyone knew, right? Not that I had known before I looked it up, that Lita in the comic books is actually Wonder Woman's daughter, right? She's Steve Rogers and Wonder Woman's daughter, the true OTP of Wonder Woman daughter. And so what we end up getting is also her son Daniel is by that the the grandson of Wonder Woman, right? Her son that ends up coming, right? And so you lose all
Crazy
of that,
movie.
huh?
Wait. Back up.
Okay, so we lost my mom for a second. She like, okay, wait a minute, y'all gotta bring me up to speed.
Okay, I got the part about Wonder Woman's daughter.
Yes.
So where the grandfather coming at? What?
I misspoke. I meant grandson. Lita's son that she has at the end of the season.
Yeah.
Technically, in the comic books, that's actually Wonder Woman's grandson, right? Because Lita is Wonder Woman's daughter.
Oh, okay.
So Daniel, who in the comic books ends up taking on a very important role later on, is the grandson of Wonder Woman. But that all of that gets lost because, well, we don't get to use Wonder Woman in this. I mean, there was a little Easter egg, and I pointed this out last week. There was a little Easter egg with the Wonder Woman action figure. When you look at Lita, they show a Wonder Woman action figure like in the very next scene to kind of give you that little Easter egg. And also Woke is pointing out that John D is actually a Justice League villain called Dr. Destiny. John D, who we had one of my favorite episodes of this season, which was 24/7, where John D is the guy, of course, who is controlling the Ruby at that time. John is supposed to be a Justice League villain. He's a super villain. He's Dr. Destiny. We don't get any of that, right? Because they couldn't use it, or they chose not to use it. And you know, I'm curious what the chat thinks and what those of you who are going to watch the replay thinks. If you think, because I know in some instances they didn't have the licensing. In other instances, from my reading, they chose not to make that connection because they wanted the Sandman to kind of stand on its own without all the superhero stuff within it. And I wonder if people thought that was a good decision or not. In that sense, you know, And so, but I think I mean, it's interesting because with that, yes, that would have added so much more layers. But at the same time, even without that, you still need to make compelling characters, right?
Yeah.
But I agree that because we lost a little bit of those backstories that we could have dived into, um, it didn't get to flesh out those parts as much, which kind of suck in that regard. Um, Thanks for pointing that out. Definitely woke about John D for sure. Because I was trying to remember that last week. I was like, John D is also somebody from the comics as well. Woke points out comics are like soap operas. They make a lot of stuff up and it's never connected. Neil Gaiman took a lot of dumb stuff and made it all make sense. Exactly. I also agree with that. Although I will say, and this is just because I'm a DC Comics head in that regard. Yes, this is true. The problem with also comic books is that, which frustrates me to no end, is that, especially what DC has done in the last couple of decades, is that they start a generation and then they go back and wipe it all out. And it can get very confusing. It's like, at least with like American soap operas that go on for like 40 something odd years, you got 40 years of a consistent timeline. Even if so-and-so comes out of the woodwork, hey, I'm your long lost daughter that you never talked about for the last 25 years, it's still connected to the person. Nobody's daughter suddenly isn't their daughter anymore, or suddenly a different character. DC Comics, unfortunately, they started doing that whole thing where, because they wanted to breathe new life, and Marvel did it too. Let's not we can't act like Marvel didn't do this, where they just kind of restarted everything, with the 52s, DC Comics, which was not an era I cared for at all, where they just kind of rewrote everything. And the whole reasoning was, oh, we're in a different timeline. I'm like, way to wipe out decades of history. Like, how am I supposed to follow this? So yeah, for sure. Woke is saying, and they did not focus on Rose's grandmother. If you read the graphic novel, the Unity can't say it was so important. That too, and and let's talk about Unity, right? I loved the grandmother. And I kind of hope we see, I mean, we probably won't because she had to die, but she's also still in the realm. And I'm just kind of like, I loved her spunk. I thought she was a great casting choice, the actress who played her, because I loved her spunk. And I wanted to see more of her. If anything, in the short time that we met her, I felt like we really got to know Unity. And I know some people also had issues with this casting as well, because of the whole connection of the whole connection of how could she, as a Black woman from a Black family, have this this sugar empire. If you think about where sugar comes from, I didn't care about that. You know what I mean? Like, listen, there were Black millionaires and billionaires back in the day, y'all. Like, that's a thing that doesn't always get touched upon, but there were. So it's not completely out of the realm of actual real reality that you have a very powerful, rich Black family. CJ Walker, Madam CJ Walker, had a whole hair empire. She was a millionaire, and there were others. So it's not completely out of the realm of possibilities. So I don't really fall into that thinking, if you know your history. But I love the grandmother. And I felt like when Rose had time to have conversations with her grandmother and have conversation with Jed, we got to see a little bit more of who she was. But unfortunately, because there were so many other characters we had to get to know, it kind of gets lost. And I think maybe that's the issue why some people didn't like the second half of the season as much. One of the issues, at least that's my theory. Because my argument here, I'm talking about this because my argument is, people are saying the second half of the season wasn't as good as the first half. I disagree with that.
I disagree with that too.
Yeah, I don't think it wasn't as good. It was different. And in certain instances, because people have gotten so used to Dream and Morpheus, and then suddenly you have to switch to some other character, and maybe it might be harder to connect with that character because some of her backstory and all this other stuff and the other characters were wiped out, that worked against it. But I don't think that messed with the quality of the storytelling. That's my, that's my thing on that. uh yes, exactly, crisis stories. Oh my gosh, Crisis on Earth. Now I watch the animated movies because I will watch pretty much any DC animated movies. I actually think the animated movies are a bit better than some of the live actions. But when they decided in the comics to just be like, yeah, no, none of that happened, and they picked and choose what they wanted to stay, I was just like, I'm good. I'm just gonna pay attention to the certain comics I want to pay attention to, because y'all done made it so I can't follow this anymore. Yes, exactly. And Unity was in England, which rich black people did exist there. And this is kind of how you have to, Spay saying that they love the grandmother, same. I think when it comes to the controversy surrounding the casting of the show and how people had issues with it, one, you can just say simply, this is a fantasy show. So why are you so hard pressed about what their race is anyway? But also, there's actual real history to back up certain things of why black people and people of color and others could totally exist during certain times of history too. So that's my advice of the counter you should give people. I recently saw a tweet that Gaiman did to someone who was wondering why Desire was black, not Desire, why Death was black. And one of the things they asked was, it was weird, because their thing was, why would people imagine, if people are supposed to imagine what they want to, if Death is supposed to appear to people how Death thinks they want to see them, why would people be why would the white guy or the white woman or other people be imagining a black woman?
How
And
you
I'm
know
like,
they imagine a black one? I mean, they probably see who they want to see, but it's
yes.
not. I mean, I don't understand that. Okay, I understand what he's asking, but you gotta put it this way too. Yeah, I didn't know what they were seeing. They probably saw who they wanted to see.
And that's
We
actually what
saw,
Gaiman, and
yeah,
that's a very good point, Elaine, because you and Gaiman are on the same thought process, because he actually, that was his response. He was like, for us, the audience, we see Death as who she is. But you can just basically in your own mind assume that whenever she was talking with the people who were about to die or whatever, they saw whoever they wanted to see. And
yeah.
that's just that. And instead of casting a different actress every single time for every single person, we stayed with the actress that we got. And hopefully his answer, I would have been a little more snarky about it, like, why do you care? But hopefully his answer puts to bed, at least for those who asked that question in good faith, puts to bed this questioning of why Death is played by a black woman, or why that's her.
Excuse me, it's Death.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
put it this way because Death can, like I said, you see Death as we see him, but then you don't know what when she come to see each and every one of them, they see what they want to see. Because
Exactly.
acting like the with the guy when he said, "Well, I see you again," she said, "Yeah."
Yeah, soon.
She
And
saw.
Gaiman actually says that, because that character, he actually gave the name of the character. I forgot what his name was, Richard or something. Gaiman says the Death that we see is, you could just say it's basically the one that Richard saw, and that's who we are going to see for the series. Pretty much, that's who we're getting. Um, and hopefully that puts to bed those questions. Woke, you actually are pointing out something I'm going to dive into in just a second. When it comes to Woke is saying, remember the girl with the furry dog, Barbie, in the dream world? I mean, Barbie. That story is its own graphic novel called The Thesio, about a witch who dated Morpheus. Exactly. And I'm going to talk about that in a second. You blowing my mom's mind right now, because we got some other stuff to talk about. This is from the comic book, Ma. So Betty says, exactly, it's a fantasy, not a documentary. It's the same thing with Rings of Power that people are having issues with, the Lord of the Rings sequel, which I also want to cover. No, Death is always Death, and Kirby Howell Baptist rock. Exactly. Exactly. Agreed. Agreed. But I'm just saying what Gaiman was saying to kind of appease some of these people who had a real issue with her consistently being a black woman. Someone pointed out when you see the flashback with her and Morpheus in the old tavern back in the 1600s, it's like, how's a black woman walking around in 1600 tavern and no one's saying anything? And I'm like, so what? This is a fantasy. And black people existed. We didn't just come into fruition, and we weren't all, before 1600 and things like that. Not everyone was enslaved,
but look, again, like I said, you don't know what those people saw.
Exactly.
We saw the black woman. They could have saw something else. That's what I'm saying. Because death is supposed to change. You don't exactly see death as death, but we saw her as death. But you don't know what they saw.
Exactly.
So what does matter whether
everyone has an issue. They're gonna have their issue. I don't think we'd have.
Go ahead. I understand that too. Know why I say that? Because when she did come in there, I'm like, okay, you're the only black thing that's in there. You know that, right?
In the tavern, right? Like, what's going on, girl? Yeah, I mean, that would stand out to us. But I think once again, she's deaf. She's literally deaf.
Yeah.
Like, it is what it is. Just assume that people are seeing whatever they see, that she doesn't stand out too much.
But look, I cannot blame anybody, because in certain things or whatever movie I be going, we did exist, but where are we? Mm-hmm. Especially when they just show.
Well, we do it in the reverse. Yeah. We're always like, hey, we existed back then. Where are the black people? Yeah, but sometimes, funny enough, when people see shows that are supposed to be back in the day and they see a black person, like, what are they doing here? It's like we actually existed. Like in ancient Greece, in ancient Rome and stuff like that, black people existed.
They had to, because what's his name? Well, he came across there.
Alexander the Great. Oh, we existed.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
You have some of these people tell it. Yeah. You have some of these people tell it, and it's like, what's the black person doing here? And it's like, yeah, no, we were back then. Woke is saying, one day you have to talk about how the incels freaked out about She-Hulk tweaking with Megan Thee Stallion.
I didn't see that yet. Did she do that already?
Yeah, I think that came out. Was it today that the new episode came out? I gotta catch up. I haven't started it yet.
I ain't seen that. Oh, I gotta see this new episode is, because they said she was gonna be on there.
Yeah. I thought that was pretty cool, and she's twerking with her. Yes, Dream and Nada, exactly. Nada, justice for Nada, y'all. She's still in hell, man. Dream,
I really have to read this book, because now y'all making me more curious about Nada and Dream, because when he turned black, I said, "Whoa, wait a minute." When he was talking to her, and then they showed him he was black. I said, "Wait a minute." And then that's when she said, "Did you see Nadia?"
Nada, yeah.
But you put her in hell? Why?
Just rude, because She-Hulk is on Disney Plus, Sabati. It's also on certain other websites that you can watch it. That will allow you to watch it if you do not have Disney Plus. Showbox.net. If you want to watch it that way. Just letting y'all know, if y'all don't want to come off of that $7.99 or however much it's costing right now, to watch one show. So I think, like I said, I don't think the second half was worse than the first half. A lot happened in the second half. It was a tone shift, but it wasn't as bad. I enjoyed it for what it was. And so, speaking of that, let's talk about some of those characters in that second half. More so, Woke actually just brought it up, and I wanted to talk about Barbie, because this is the thing. We also got little glimpses into future stories, right? That I want to touch upon. I'm going to show y'all a panel from the comic.
But why Barbie? Okay, so it's when they had the part of Barbie and when she was in their dreams?
Yes. So I know, to me, when I first saw it, as someone who hadn't read the comics, I was like, that's a very elaborate dream that they have Barbie having, with this whole thing about, the realm and stuff like that. If y'all remember, there was a scene similar to this that Rose was watching when she was looking at all of her friends' dream from the house, right? And this was Barbie's one. If you remember, Barbie was walking around. For some reason, she had sunglasses on, but she had the sunglasses on. She was wearing the purple dress, and she was walking with a very cute, cuddly looking woolly mammoth type creature. I think,
Mm-hmm.
what's his name in the comics? Tinselbaum or something. And it seemed like there was a whole story going on, right?
Is that a vulture with her?
There's a lot going on there, Ma. It's very fantasy based,
And
right?
this is
So
Spanish.
yes, it's in Spanish. I'm just showing the.
The
Can you
woman.
let me
Okay.
let
Okay.
me
Okay.
let me set the stage here.
Okay.
Um, yes, so Betty actually makes a good point. It was like Barbie was in Narnia, right? And at first, I thought that was kind of, when I watched the episode, I thought that was just kind of the reference. I think all of us have not all of us. I know I have at one time or another had dreams where I'm in some far off, distant land. And I am some kind of, usually I'm not a princess. I've always dreamed that I'm some warrior woman like Xena or something like that, and I'm fighting like these fantasy creatures. So I kind of at first, because like I said, I hadn't read the comics, kind of just thought that must be what Barbie tends to think of herself as in the thing. I had no idea that it's actually connected to a future story, or hopefully a future story if we get season 2, fingers crossed, that where Barbie starts to take center stage. Now I won't go too much into it because one could argue that it could be considered spoilers if the show does adapt it. And I know some people, even though they know it's a comic, they don't always want to get spoiled from the comics. Is that Barbie will end up, if they follow this, kind of taking on her own story, and that there's very much a connection between what we saw of her in the dream to what we will get of a future story of Barbie if they continue with it. So I think that's very interesting. And Woke actually talked about it, touched on it when it came to Barbie. And I think this is the beautiful thing about the show, is that kind of what I was talking about with Rose, and the thing with that is that this show is not just about Morpheus, it's about stories that are all connected to the world of Morpheus, to the dream world, to the endless, and who they are and stuff like that. And Barbie's story is one of those, and what we got with Rose was one of hers. And I don't think that's the last we'll see of Rose either. I hope not. We took this time to meet her. I do
Well,
think
they're gonna have to keep her.
yes, because the whole thing with Lita and Daniel and stuff is probably going to come more into play. But I wanted to touch on that too, just in case people were wondering what was going on with Barbie and if that had any kind of significance at all. Well, it does. And so I think that'll be interesting to dive more into a more fantasy approach that we may be getting in the future if they take it on, right? Woke is saying this, that story of what Lucifer does. Let's just say that Lucifer series is a direct adaptation of what happened after the events of the Sandman. Lucifer had its own series and it was insane. And that's another thing that's interesting. Ma, I think you're actually a fan of the Lucifer show, right, Ma? Yes. Y'all, when I was at the Hollywood Critics Association TV Awards that we had a couple of weeks ago, because I'm a member of the Hollywood Critics Association, proud member, the actor who plays Lucifer was actually there. He was presenting, and my mom just kept texting me, just try to go up to him, try to say something. I'm like, I'm not going to fangirl for this guy. I'm at a professional event.
I'm a fan girl.
He was very nice. He seemed very nice and whatnot. So yes, for those who also don't know, funny enough, the Lucifer is actually, okay, so this is where it gets kind of weird, right? Lucifer, the show that came on Fox and everything, is actually based off of supposedly the Lucifer and the Sandman, right? But because we didn't have a Sandman show or anything, people probably never made that connection. But it was based off of the Sandman and the spin-off series of the Sandman comics, which was based off of the Lucifer and the Sandman. Now, from what my understanding is, because y'all know I like to do little deep dives and see what people are saying about, content and stuff like that. People who were fans of the Sandman, and Woke, let me know because you actually are someone who has read the comics and loves it. There were people that, and when I was reading it, there were people that really had problems with Lucifer, this TV series, and felt like they shouldn't have even made it seem like it was connected to the Sandman, because they felt like they kind of gutted it of all the things that made the Lucifer and the Sandman who they were. So let me know if that's true or not. But that's some of the opinions I was reading online. But for like fun fact, Lucifer is actually, the TV series is actually supposed to be based off of the Lucifer of the Sandman comics, which is very cool. So it's funny because if we ever did want it's funny because if we ever did want a spinoff with who is currently playing Lucifer, it probably would take on a whole different kind of look and feel, considering that they are very different from the Lucifer of the Fox show, which I think is funny. Woke is saying, warning: if you like Lucifer the show, the comic is nothing like it. I mean, he helps crest a new god in his comic. It was a whole thing. Yes. That's what I was mentioning, in the sense that I heard it's very different. So don't read Lucifer in the comics thinking that you're going to get the Lucifer that you saw on the TV show, because it's very different. Although, funny enough, that show is supposed to be based off of this Lucifer.
Oh, okay.
Wow, right?
Yeah, well, like I said, I don't read the comics, but damn, that just make me want to just go and find comic books. And
what, from my understanding, the Lucifer in the comic books was supposed to be based off of the look of the Lucifer in the comic books, supposed to be based off of David Bowie, at least the original look of him, which I think is also very interesting as well, which is definitely not what the Lucifer show went with.
but wait a minute, the one that's in Sandman really is
a woman. Yeah. But I mean, she does a great job. But yeah, another different interpretation. I don't know how people feel about the casting of it or not, because they took a few liberties. But go ahead,
there were some points out. Yeah, I need to ask you some questions on that too.
On what?
On Lucifer. If she's remember that part when I think it was the army of the army of death? Who was the ones that say they ready to march against Morpheus?
Oh, those were these beings in some weird realm. They were like the board. Maybe Woke can help me out with that if we're going to see a little bit more of those characters in the future. Yeah, but it seemed like some kind of board that Lucifer consults with, that they're in some kind of shadow realm, who kind of came out. They didn't have any faces. They were just shadows talking about, we're ready to march at any time and you need to make a decision, kind of a deal. Yeah. Yeah, and in the comic, Lucifer did not. I would imagine not. But it's Fox. They had to get some
they had
propaganda in there.
They had in there.
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to figure out. Like in that
they were,
the way they was talking, like they're not happy with. And I figured, wait a minute, you're the devil. Don't you have control over all these people? All those people that's down there. But the way they were saying, like if you don't, like if you don't decide that we're gonna take it, like that's in a sense, that's why I felt that they was telling her, if you don't do something about it, we're gonna do something about it.
Yes. And I think that shows that there's more to this, to what's going to happen. I think that's what I also like about the show, that it gave glimpses of what we may see in the future. Like, who are those people? Why do they want to march on? Why do they want to bring hell on earth, or whatever they're attempting to do? So Betty is saying, when Dream went to hell, was there a Mezikeen there? I can't remember. Let me see. I'm gonna look it up.
We just saw the big guy. What was he? He was just
a demon.
He
He
was a
was a
demon.
demon.
Okay, he was there. What's it? She, what? That's half or something.
Yes. Mezakine was there. Wasn't Mezakine maybe not
Is
actually.
he the bull or half of the
No, no,
bull?
no, it's a woman. But
It's a
wasn't who was what was the name of Lucifer's partner? That's it, that's
yeah,
their
that
lover.
girl that was right there with her face.
Yeah. But I think this is a different character that Sabetti's talking about.
Well, I don't know who
Maybe.
Master King is. You know.
But it just shows us there's so much more to explore. There's a whole world to explore. And I think that's what's very exciting about the Sandman, because they're teasing it out bit by bit, which I appreciate for the show. Yes, she was the woman. That's what I was saying. She was the woman with Lucifer. That's what I'm saying. She was the partner.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And she actually plays a role in the comics as well, in the Lucifer comics, from my understanding. So there's that. Uh, Lucifer's lover and whatnot. So, I'm sure people also probably had a problem with the fact that she was a black actress. They're just throwing black women and everything in this show. um. So, yeah. So we have a lot that could come up. And the one of the final things I wanted to talk about in this part 2, I wanted to touch a little bit on Desire a little bit more, who I think may be emerging as kind of our main antagonist for. Now, I'm just going based off of the TV show at this moment, not the comic series in that regard, just because of the way they're setting up the fact that the fact of what they seem to be wanting to be setting up between Desire and and Dream in that regard. I think this is fan art. It might be from the comics, but that's Desire from I believe this is Desire from the comics. Desire, I think, has dark hair in the comics. Which is interesting to me. That was the thing that kind of confused me, because seeing the way that Lucifer looks in the comics, I would argue that the Desire that we got in the show kind of looks more like the Lucifer from the comics, with the whole beautiful person, with the androgynous person with the thing. But this is the Desire from thing, and I don't think it's too different. It seems very similar, except that we have blonde hair. We have blonde hair in this regard. So I'm excited for Desire, because this was the other thing about the second half of the season. Desire came into play. We didn't have Desire. We had people mentioning Desire and stuff, but Desire was also who emerged in the second half of the season, which also, to me, also made the second half just as good as the first, because Desire came in like, I'm watching, brother. Like, you know what I mean? And I was just like, who is this? Woke is saying, pay attention to the kindly ones. They are really important. Okay.
Oh yeah, those are 3 witches that come and tell them.
Yes.
And say you're not asking the important question.
Exactly. I also dug that too. There was so much. Yeah, there was a lot going on with that too, and hopefully that comes into play if the show follows through on that as well. There's so many different characters to explore, and that's why I said I think it's good what the show did this season, and getting people used to the idea that Dream is not going to always be, Morpheus is not always going to be the most prominent character every episode, because I think they had to set that up, because there are so many other stories that take place within the Sandman, I think, comic universe, that they're probably going to want to explore, that doesn't have necessarily Morpheus as the center stage of it. And we'll get to see other characters, which I think will be really good. Yes, that is also something. Although I feel like they downplayed it a little bit in the TV show, because in the TV show, Unity actually fell in love with Desire. They said, I made love to the most beautiful man with gold eyes. And Unity seemed to have fallen in love. So I would argue that they played it a little different in narrative, I think, with kind of saying that she was seduced by Desire in her dreams more so. And I kind of like that a little bit more than, I mean, although that is kind of because she didn't really know that was what was happening and that she had a whole ass kid while she was asleep, which is messed up. Um, yes, Rose is part endless, which let's talk about that plot point, right? So that was another major plot point, although I felt like it kind of got muffled a little bit, the significance of it. But because Desire had a child with Unity, that made then Rose Desire's great granddaughter, which then made Rose Morpheus's great grand niece, aka a family member. Now, what we found out in the show, right, which is why Morpheus eventually goes to visit Desire, why Morpheus goes to visit Desire is to say, you almost had me. You thought that I was going to kill a family member. And that would have been against, I guess, this cosmic rule that they have that they're not supposed to do that to each other, which would have made Morpheus get in trouble. Because that was so funny enough, Desire was playing the long game, y'all. And this is a crazy long game of like 100 years, but I guess they're endless. So they got time, right? But Desire was playing the long game of having this child who, with Unity, who originally was supposed to be the Vortex. And I think Desire kind of saw an opportunity because when the whole thing fell, when Morpheus got captured, Unity fell into a sleep, so she wasn't able to be the Vortex. Desire saw the opportunity to then have a child with the Vortex, to then later come into contact with Morpheus later on, who would then have been related to them. Because if Unity had just been the Vortex, wouldn't have been related to Morpheus, right? So he could have killed her and been done with it. But Desire has this long game plan, pretty strategic, if you ask me, of making it so, I'll make it so the Vortex is our family member. So if he kills her, he gets in major trouble. I thought that was really smart. Morpheus ended up figuring it out once they heard the thing about the gold eyes. And that's when we find out that it seems like Desire is trying to take Morpheus out, which I loved because I kind of love this character as something of our villain of the show. I know people are kind of comparing Desire to kind of a Loki character for those who pay attention to Marvel. The Loki character of kind of mischief and kind of always going after Thor, and how, you know, in the Marvel Cinematic Universe was a very, and also in the comics, but if you go by this, for those who didn't read the comics, it was kind of like this bad villain, and then they kind of turn anti-hero. I would argue that Desire, in my opinion, has the potential to be better than Loki. Not necessarily, and I know that might be blasphemy for people who love Loki as a character, but I felt like at some point they defamed Loki to make them, you know, because Tom Hiddleston is great and they wanted, you know, to kind of do that. I felt like he could have still maintained his the badness of it, but I think we have the potential for something a little bit more layered and a little bit more rated R, right? Because also Marvel is very Disney-fied, and I think we have a chance with something a bit more with this interpretation of a antagonist that may not be out and out a villain, but have their own things that they want to go. But I would argue, yes, that the Desire Morpheus sibling rivalry is very much similar to the Loki Thor sibling rivalry that we got in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, right? So I think that's really interesting as well. Woke is saying the Rose Walker story needed its own 10 episode season. There was a bit too much for just 6 episodes. I agree. And I think that's why I'm saying that I feel like people might have judged it a little harsher because, like we just went through, there was a lot that they had to take out, and then there was a lot they still had to fit in. And so maybe it got lost, the impact of it, because you know, um, because of that. Woke is saying, anyone following, Kang was probably one of the first finest villains in comics. The brother improved him. I'm interested in Kang too, where we might go with that as well.
So wait a
So
minute.
that's
Also,
Marvel though, Ma. That's Marvel. That's not
no,
this.
no, no. I have a question. I
Okay.
just thought about the two brothers. So is that
Okay.
supposed to be Abe and came from
Yes,
the
from the
Bible in
Bible.
a sense when he kept
Even
killing his brother over and over again?
not in a sense, they are. They are
Well,
from the
okay,
Bible.
but he still killed his brother over
Yes,
and
over
over
and over
again
again.
and buries him.
Yeah. Oh, I was like, what's that on? It's my cat. It's one of my cats, y'all. It's Pato. Hey, Pato. You want to say hi to the people? Yes. She's like, you've been
So,
in here so long. What's mommy
but
doing?
see, that's what I'm saying. Now they got Cain and Abel, and then why? Not quite understanding. They threw that in there too. So, hey,
I mean, there's a lot going on in it, right?
yeah, because I'm not quite okay. I caught that when I saw Cave. I said, okay, so that must mean they're from the keep killing him over. I said, oh, so
Well, one could argue that's their hell, right? Having
I
to die
guess
over and
so.
over again.
Yeah. Well, is that
Yeah,
their
or
dream?
dream
That
slash nightmare.
yeah, because he keep coming back and he keep killing them.
Yeah. But they love each other as brothers, so there's that.
Yeah, true that. But like you know, I don't see how they could. I think the second half was good though. I mean, I understand what they were
There was
saying.
a lot, and that
So,
was the issue. There was so much. But I would argue, had it been, although I can agree with you, Oak, that maybe it should have been 10 episodes, I argue that people would have complained about it. Had it been a whole season on its own, people wouldn't have liked it. They did if let's say they had made season 2 all about Rose and them. I guarantee you people would have had issues with that. It would have been like, no, 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 and then no, this show went off the deep end. So I think they did that to appease both ends who might not get into the Rose story, unfortunately.
yeah, but we have to now since her while she was doing the vortex, she brought two people that wasn't supposed to be together and made a baby, and that's what he told
Yes.
her that was not supposed to happen.
Yes, which goes into what to finish out a little bit, what could be potentially happening next season, right? Woke is actually making a very good point that Cain and Abel were indeed the first story. So of course they live in the dream because there's so many stories in the dream world, right? Very true. So Betty is saying there was so much packed into this season. I forgot about, right? And I think we'll probably see more of them. But yes, once again, there was so much going on that you kind of have to. I mean, this is definitely going to have to be a rewatch kind of season, especially hopefully when season 2 comes about, to just kind of remind myself of all the little tidbits we got that no doubt we will have reference to going forward. Because as we saw, like with Barbie, we're most likely we are going to return to certain characters that we saw in season 1, right? Like Lita and her son and Barbie and Rose and others, and Abe and Cain and stuff like that. So speaking of some of the stuff, Woke is like, don't mind me. I've literally read the Sandman 1,000 times. Well, we appreciate your insight
I'm
here,
glad
Woke.
you did because I would have had like what?
Right? So Betty's saying, I feel like I need, yes, exactly. Because this is the thing with shows like this, which I love, you kind of end up missing things sometimes, right? And you go back and watch and you're like, I didn't even notice that. Or I didn't even remember this. And you're like, okay, yeah, I gotta. And knowing because of the source material is so chock full of stuff, there's so many Easter eggs, especially if we end up reading this comic series. I know I'm definitely going to want to go back to the season and be like, okay, what little Easter eggs can I see now that I've read these comics a little bit more extensively? So there's that. So for season 2, lady, what are you hoping to get more of a season 2? And let us know, y'all, in the chat and also in the replay comments, what are you hoping for in season 2 as we wrap up our deep dive into season
Well,
1?
I hope they do bring back Rose and the other lady and the baby because, like I said, what Dream said, you have the baby for now.
Yeah. What did you think about that when he said that?
Yeah, I said, well, then you coming? You like Rumpelstiltskin? You coming for the king? No, when
When
he
she
said that,
pricks her finger
you
on
know,
the
really, I mean, the way he said that, I said, but wait a minute, he's a child, so why are you coming?
well, Dream
Like
think
okay, really, he's claiming that the child is his
because it
because
was
you
made in his realm.
because
Everything
it was
made in his
made in
realm
his
is
realm,
his.
but it wasn't really his realm. It was the vortex realm. I mean, what she did with the reality thing and his dream. Okay, it was half and half, but really, that's a real child.
Mm-hmm.
So I just want to see where he's going to take that, how that all going to come together because he, like he said, he's coming back to get the child. How Rose and all of them's going to feel about that.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
want to see the continuation with Desire. But I want to meet his other siblings. So I hope they bring in the other siblings. Now I know that Lucifer is somehow is she one of his siblings?
Lucifer isn't one of his siblings. I don't think.
He's
I
just
don't think
he's
Lucifer doesn't count as an endless. I don't think. What do y'all? What say you guys? I don't. I feel like Lucifer doesn't count as an endless because they were once an angel that got cast out. Even though Lucifer,
yeah, but
I
he
guess
keeps
how does that work, right?
yeah, because he just kept. Remember, he said he had to go into a round, but he had to be invited. He had to let them know that they was
A
coming in
distinguished
there.
guest, yeah.
So
I
I'm
don't
trying.
think Lucifer counts as one of the endless
No,
because he didn't seem to be. Morpheus didn't seem to be talking to Lucifer like a sibling. Like when he talks, like when Morpheus talks to Desire and Death in different ways, um, it seemed to be more of a sibling kind of family thing. I don't think it's the same with Lucifer. One then
Lucifer.
has to argue. See, this is where I get confused then, because if Lucifer was cast out by God, does that mean that Morpheus and all of them that their parent is God? Like who is their parent? Who's the parents of the endless? Is it God? Right?
And he said Lucifer.
I'm not saying that they haven't addressed that. I just think it'll be interesting when, especially for those of us who haven't read the comics, when they might start to dive
Yeah,
into
so
that a
they
little
start
bit more.
understand. So I hope they do clarify some of the things that I'm thinking, like explain Lucifer. Then like I said, I would love to meet the other siblings of it. Now, it's
Yes, I would
Desire,
love to meet them too.
Death, and
Yes,
who
more of
Despair.
despair. Let's see. We
Yeah.
all
So what else?
kind of
Is it Glutton and whatever? I'm
like who
just
are the other endless? Yes,
yeah.
I agree.
What we try not to do. So I hope they do because especially like I said, I like Desire, so I like to see where they're gonna go with her.
I love Desire. I just think they're going to be a great antagonist. Woke is saying they've got to do the Satan storyline. Let's see. Yes, Betty, Dream can be very cold. And I think that's part of the great thing about his character that he definitely has growing to do. He has an arc that I think we'll see develop or regress. Who knows what direction, because no character arc is exactly like a straight line to being perfect, right? To see where that goes because he's not a perfect character at all, right? Which I love. I love about that. Woke is saying the baby was created in a dream by ghost. Exactly.
That's
Betty
what
was
they
asking the
but
question,
you know.
does Sandman have dominion over ghosts? And I think that's the interesting thing too. This is where, and this is where I think it'll be interesting how they further explain and showcase the universe that they're building. Because, like I said, and I think Woke, you answered in the chat that Lucifer is the first angel, not an endless, which kind of comes into the question of, like I just said, who are the parents of the endless? Is it God? Because I mean, if Lucifer was cast out, some being had to cast Lucifer out. Is it the same being that created the endless? And then therefore, does that mean that the endless, Morpheus and all of them are the equivalent of Jesus in being God's children, literal children, right? Although they weren't born of man like Jesus was. I think it'll be interesting to see how they combine, because I know we might be getting the Lilith character at some point, and Lilith, depending on which scrolls you read of the Bible, was the first woman. I don't know if they're going to go about it this way, but was the first woman before Eve. they may not do it this way, but in certain mythology, Lilith, being the first woman, said the secret name of God because she wasn't feeling Adam, and she didn't want to be his, you know, his inferior, and so she got to leave because she said the secret name of God. And a lot of certain patriarchal societies use this as a way to say that Lilith then turned into a demon that ate babies and stole the breath of babies and stuff like that. But to me, I think that was just the patriarchy trying to kind of dilute this original story of a woman kind of just choosing her own destiny, which is why I love the Lilith character in that thing. And I don't know if the Sandman's going to have that same backstory for Lilith, or if it's even the Lilith from the Bible. But that'll be interesting. So that's one of the things I'm looking forward to, how they go
Well,
about
we
that
need to
story, if they
read the book
all.
you wrote, you know.
Oh yes, I wrote a book of that talks about something like that, which I am in the process of trying to get, published at some point, a fictional story about Lilith. So I have a little bit of bias about that. Let's see what y'all are saying in the chat. And answering Sabetti's question about the dominion over the ghost, Woke is saying no. Ross, Hector Hall died but ran into the dream realm while Morpheus was a prisoner, and the nightmares were helping him in order to create their own world. I see. So Hector kind of got lost on the way to the afterlife. Lita, so he ended up in the dream realm because Morpheus wasn't around, and so he ended up in the dream realm, and which is why Morpheus told him in the show, you need to go wherever you were supposed to go. You're not supposed to, you can't be taking up residence in the dream world, because you need to go wherever, whether it's hell or heaven, you need to go there, which is where he ended up going. It was a very sad moment, especially when he was like this real handsome man, and he became this then turned to dust, which kind of sucks.
So where did he go? Hope he went to heaven.
Yeah.
He did go to heaven, right?
Who knows? That's why Morpheus just said you're supposed to go wherever you're supposed to end up. We don't know. I hope he went to heaven. Well, he's giving us a little background saying, remember Jed's dream where he wore the super suit and called himself Sandman? In the comics, that was Hector Hall, and he was an actual superhero. It was a whole thing way back in the 1979s. See, that's the whole thing. There's so much backstory from the DC comics and stuff in connection to this show that you get those little Easter eggs if you know about it, but which is, once again, kind of goes back to what we're saying about probably needing to do a rewatch once we go and read the comics and such. But thanks for that, Woke. So yeah, I would like to see more of Desire. I'd like to see how they're going to take on the Lucifer story, because of the fact that we did kind of get a Lucifer spinoff, so they can't necessarily follow that. So are they going to then kind of switch it up with Lucifer and what Lucifer chooses to do? I think they'll still remain very faithful to the comics. I'm not worried about that. And I hope we see more of Desire. And like you said, I hope we see more of the Endless, because there are more Endless. And I hope we get a little bit of a glimpse into the Endless sibling that was mentioned that abandoned their post. It was mentioned in the comment section in part 1 who that person might be and was. And so I'm interested to see if we find out who it was that abandoned their post, what that post was, and where are they now, right? So I think that'll be very interesting as well, for sure. But overall, I still definitely give the season an A. I really love this show. I love all the mythology. I love the potential of everything we can dive into. And I also love that although the show is R-rated, they don't overdo it, and I appreciate that too, because some shows, they're R-rated and they try to be so edgy that they're almost cringe, and it's also sometimes it's too much. And so I am happy that this show kind of totes the line of that. And I know some people, once again, in the fandom and others, felt that then made the show more sanitized in the comics. That was another complaint I was seeing. that people felt like the show was sanitized and kind of lacked some of the edge of the comics, but I don't really think so. I think
Not so many people. Well, like you said, not okay. The ones that read the books and read the graphic, yeah, they should know. They, saw they read the book and looking at this. Yeah, well, I don't think you could do everything that was in that in those graphics. Really put it on there. I mean, I know some stations do let you see the really gruesome.
mhm. Yeah, exactly. And Netflix could do that too. For some reason, they have a Marilyn Monroe movie coming out that's rated NC-17, and I just think they should let my girl rest instead of coming out with another movie about her. Like, just let my girl rest. I love her, Marilyn Monroe. Um, but so it's not like Netflix can't do it, but I don't think they have to with this show. There's a lot that goes on there that can be gritty, but I don't. I think it still had a lot of bite and just
Yeah,
enough to
I
kind of
like it
get
the way
everyone
it
in.
was. Because some of the things you didn't expect and we're happy with. Wasn't expecting that.
Yeah. Woke is saying they had to sanitize some things, like when Morpheus punishes his jailer's son. It was gross. Yeah, I'm sure I mean, from what I've heard, there's a lot of extreme things that happen in the comics. So, and I hope there are some things they change in the comics too, like what happens to the two women that Rose meets. What was their names? I had their names. Let me see it. When she goes down to Zelda and Chantel,
Oh yeah.
who we meet and who I also like them, and I'd like to see more of them, but then I kind of read what happens to them in the comics and I'm like, I hope they don't go that route. So one can also hope that, so I guess what I'm saying is I want more of the comics, but I want them to keep doing what they're doing now, which is looking at what they had in the comics and deciding, do we have to be completely faithful to this, or can we update it a little bit so that it makes more sense for this time? And I think they've done a really good job of that in the season, in the show thus far, and I hope they keep with that. I don't think it has to be a literal adaptation of the comics, because uh not everything translates as well in the comics. I, as a firm believer of the fact that Glenn shouldn't have died the way he did in the Walking Dead TV show as he did in the comics, and I thought that that was ridiculously brutal to show that on television. And considering how much we loved and knew Glenn from the TV show, they shouldn't have killed him that way. That is a prime example of why you don't always need to have the exact thing that happened in the comics happen on a TV show. Pick and choose, y'all. You don't got to do everything. Um, Woke is giving a thing saying the audiobooks are worth listening to. You might like that, Ma. The audiobooks. I know sometimes you don't really like reading comics sometimes, right? Like the pictures are kind of distracting
No,
for you.
I love comics. Don't get me wrong. I can read them.
Yeah. Because I
I,
remember you
I
thought that
had
it was a novel.
well, I know, like the graphic. No, I have seen them. I'd be like, oh, okay. I said one day I was gonna look at it, but I picked up one when I was over there when you in California, and
Yeah.
we went to the comics book store, and I
Yes.
saw the graphic. I said, oh, okay.
Yeah, they got some great stuff. Graphic novels can be really awesome as someone who has a comic book collection, and whose father has an extensive comic book collection, as my mom is well aware of. There's whole boxes in their house of comic books. How I originally got into all of this stuff in the background, you see the Hulk, the Joker, all of that. My Batman on the side here. Yes, Glenn, broken heart. You don't always gotta translate everything in the comics, and I actually hope they do not do that with Chantel and Zelda, of what happened in the comics to them. I hope they do something different. So yeah, overall an A, and I have really enjoyed this show, so I'm looking forward to it
Me
for season
too.
2, and hopefully we get a season 2. But yeah, y'all, let us know in the comments, I was about to say comic book section, in the comment section of the replay, what you're looking forward to in season 2, any stories, any characters you want to see more of, and maybe even characters you want to see less of. Was there anyone that you were just kind of like, I don't need more of them? I know I would like to see the Corinthian come back. From my understanding, he does come back in the comics in a different kind of way. I would hope that we get the Corinthian again. I really liked the Corinthian. So I would love him. He was part of my top 3 fave characters. And that's another thing that changed, because from my understanding in the comics, the Corinthian didn't have as big of a role as he had in the show this season. And so this is another example of adaptations tweaking things so that it works better or that it can improve. I actually did cover Harley Quinn, the animated series, the first 2 seasons for AfterBuzz TV. Woke, if you might know that station, AfterBuzz Television. I covered the first 2 seasons. I'll admit I fell out of it towards the end of season 2. I felt like the show kind of jumped the shark a little bit. I think they rushed some things, but yes, I definitely watched it. I haven't caught the latest season though, because I kind of fell out of it. I'll admit that. But also, so thanks y'all for joining us for, and watching this video, if you're watching the replay, for part 1 and this part 2 of the Sandman season 1 review and deep dive. I really enjoy the show. I love talking about this stuff, and I particularly love talking about this stuff with my mama, whose birthday it is on Tuesday. So if you're hearing this and you're in the comment section, make sure to give her birthday. It's right after Labor Day weekend. She has her B-Day, and I'm so blessed to have this woman in my life, y'all, and to have her as my mother. I love her truly and deeply, and I love that she is a good enough sport to sit with me and watch this show and these shows and talk with me on this show, because it makes it so much fun to build this community with you all, with my mother, because you get to get a glimpse into the woman who made me who I am. And I adore her. I truly do. I love this woman, and I know y'all love her too. So make sure to give her a happy birthday if you haven't. Also, we are going to be doing Echoes, the very soap opera Lifetime mini series that's on Netflix. I started watching it, and y'all, I gotta admit, it sucked me in. So I'm getting my mama to watch it, and we're not going to do 2 parts on that show. We're probably going to just do 1 part on it. A lot happens, but we're going to try to dive into it. For Echoes, for maybe sometime next week, maybe the week after, for Echoes. And we're also going to, I'm going to be doing I want you to see if you want to do it, but I want to do Rings of Power. Let us know if you'd be interested in us doing a deep dive of each episode of Rings of Power, the Lord of the Rings prequel series, because I'm interested in it, so I do want to talk about it. So I was figuring I'd talk about it here on the channel here. And we're on the countdown to the new Chucky season, y'all. The new season of Chucky's coming up. I'm very excited about that. I believe it's coming out in October. So I will be covering that as well, God willing. Anything else before we sign off for this Labor Day weekend, lady? I have to see the Joker run for mayor. Okay. Oh, so he comes back. All right. Okay, I'll watch it. I might, because Joker's my boy, as you can see. That's him in the background. For sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, and no shit, I did enjoy Chucky. Chucky has a show. He has a show. Yeah. Oh, you gotta watch it, Woke. Season 1 is amazing. It's so good. It has the proper balance of horror and dark comedy and thrills. It's such a good show. And I was skeptical going in. I didn't think I would like it, but I loved it. It's on Sci-Fi Network, but you can watch it also on Peacock and anywhere else where you can watch shows that are online. But yes, check out Chucky season 1. Yes, the murder doll. Woke is like, the murder doll has a series? Yes. And they do a really good job of it, and I recommend it. So check that out, because season 2 is coming, and I definitely will be covering it here. You can also check out my season 1 coverage of each of the episodes that I did as well. Anything else? And yeah, we'll be covering shows as they come out. Let us know if you have a suggestion. Let me know in the comments of a show. I know some of you have been wanting me to cover American Horror Stories. I was disappointed in the first season of Horror Stories, so I've been kind of hesitant to dive back into it. But if you have any other shows that you're wanting to watch and you're like, hey, it'd be great to have a conversation about that, please do comment and let me know what you're thinking. What else you want us to check out? I know some people want us to check out She-Hulk as well, so we might do that. Is Annabelle getting a show? No, probably. I don't think Annabelle could have a show because Annabelle is actually technically, well, actually, Annabelle is not really a live doll. She's just the doll is just a conduit for a demon, which is different from Chucky. Chucky is actually a soul within a doll. And that is where my horror nerdiness comes out for everyone. Yes, it is still on. It's an American Horror Story and American Horror Stories. American Horror Stories, plural, is the new spin-off show they have where each episode is a different story. So kind of like an anthology series, kind of like Twilight Zone, but horror in the American Horror Story universe. It wasn't the best the first season, so but I did cover it if people are going to check it out. But okay, y'all, have a happy and blessed rest of your weekend. Be good to you. Be good, hang out. Also,
Be safe.
be safe. Also, my latest published article, because I am a full-time journalist, y'all, if you didn't know, that's what I do. It has been published for those who celebrate Labor Day weekend. Yay, union, yes. Here's I'm a editor and writer at People's World, and recently this today was published a list of 7 movies to celebrate Labor Day weekend. If you want to check that out. If you're someone who knows the history of Labor Day, or if you don't and you want to get into the history of Labor Day, you can check out this list. And 9 to 5 is on it, and some other gems. Norma Ray that my mom loves as well. Yes, Labor Day is that. Well, funny enough, New York was where the first Labor Day parade took place. Was in New York. 1,000 workers left the factory unpaid and marched to celebrate labor, and that happened in New York. So it's definitely a thing. The history of it. Yes, as a working class girl, eat the rich kind of deal. As my mama knows my political leanings. I definitely know about Labor Day. Okay, y'all. So stay safe out there, and we'll talk to you soon.